So, for my goal here onto graduation, my strategic vision is to pass my classes, which would ultimately lead to my graduation, be fully prepared mentally and physically for the Marines, and to succeed well in my initial course of ninjutsu training, which ultimately leads to my first order of operations, which was to complete my English classwork and study for the microanatomy, which, my goodness, it was very difficult for me to study this, but I definitely did master studying the hand, which was, of course, another thing on my list to study thoroughly, as I had to make up a couple tests just because I scored very low on them, and this would ultimately lead to me almost failing my anatomy class, which was not good. So I needed to really focus on studying these two things as thoroughly as possible in order to increase my test scores that I will be ultimately making up within 3 days' time. So, of course, the time to conduct this was 3 days. Given the very short time frame, I had to do my best with what I could, which led into me putting in an operational order. My obstacles were devices, for example, temptation of being distracted on social media platforms, clutterness, which is something I can and cannot fix because of the household I live in, and of course family. Now, they're not distractions per se, family-wise, but they could be distracting in a way sometimes, which is, of course, an obstacle would be best to put down. Another obstacle would be boredom. So whenever it comes to me, and what really affects my studying is being bored with what I study. And because of this really leads to me not studying well, efficiently enough, or long enough. So I bounce to something else because of simply being really bored, which I'm sure a lot of everyone in high school could relate to, hopefully. Another obstacle would be no clear approach, leading to randomness, which takes up time. And this right here is really a really big obstacle I had to overcome. And no current study habit, which means there's no clear time or no clear psychological habit formation to where, oh, okay, I'll study at this time. So it's not automatic, so I'd have to really think if I was ever going to pursue simply studying, So I really had to time block. And if I didn't time block, I'm pretty much screwed. It's because I don't have any study habit right now. So that was one of the main obstacles. Now, my assets to my disposal would be the library. Now, within the library, it's simply quiet for the most part, unless there's hectic kids that come over, which they eventually get kicked out. And it's a really good environment to do deep work on studying or doing classwork. It's because, for one, I have to do the effort of walking across the bridge, walking all clear into, a far distance, just to make it to the library itself, which means, more likely than not, I'd like to stay there for as long as possible and get the most out of my time in the library, which in turn would actually more so forcibly keep me there and actually wanting to study and do work more. This limits the distractions mentioned previously, which would be doing it in a home environment, which is another strategic benefit. So yeah, the library in itself is a really huge asset that I definitely have first on my list. Another asset would be I can time block. Even though I'm not too experienced with time blocking, I can time block, which I can use to my advantage if I used it wisely. Another advantage would be my Chromebook if used wisely. For example, if I use my Chromebook to play Blicket, which is a study platform, it decreases boredom, which is definitely an asset I could definitely use. So instead of casting the Chromebook aside entirely, say I'm not going to be on it for 3 days straight, I can instead use it to my advantage in order to keep me more hooked on studying for a particular amount of time without getting bored, more focused. A place to meditate if my mind becomes exhausted, which would be in this room here, which is another very, very good asset, a very good benefit. Notebooks. I have a lot of notebooks, which could be used to, well, you can guess many, many different things, especially whenever it comes to studying in itself. A recorder so I can hear my voice playback, which could be used. Another asset of the Chromebook would be simply recording myself with what I'm studying. For example, let's say I'm doing flashcards, or let's say I'm doing something related to auditory, right? Auditory learning. I can simply say what I'm trying to study, say what I'm trying to memorize, put it in a recorder, and play it back, which is another effective way of ingraining knowledge and facts into your mind. And of course, another thing would be water and coffee. One, water is very good because I need to hydrate. The more hydrated I am, the more I'll benefit cognitively speaking. Coffee, it's really good for just in case you're tired, but you need to study. So it kind of gives you that energy boost, which it's not good if you do drink excessive coffee. Like 1 cup or 2 cup would be good. Not a lot of coffee. Just enough to get you wakeful. So those are my assets in particular. And this is how everything turned out 3 days later, and of course, I am recording it on this day. So, mainly, the main goal was to complete my English note. Complete my English notes, which I did. I did successfully, completed them. And study for the 2 tests, which would be the microanatomy and, of course, the hand test. Now, what went right? Because of my planning tactics, like using the asset of the library, time blocking ahead of time, and making studying for anatomy more bearable by adapting to my strength of memorizing things in order fast through vocal repetition, and combining Blicket, which is a website, which took away boredom, I was able to memorize facts in a particular fashion. I then realized that it would be optimal to it would be optimal to do academic studies after a meal. It's because, lately I've been really focusing on just, I need to do this whenever it comes to academic studies, whenever I got home. But I still need to balance, exercise, other free time, and other things with academics in itself. And so I've learned that, or realized really, every time I'm done after eating a meal, I have to wait a particular time to exercise. I have to wait a particular time to be really active for the food to digest properly, which is a clan custom of mine. Or not mine, but of the clan's custom. So, my master told me to really wait 2 to 3 hours after every meal for physical activity, like physical exercise or intense exercise. This depends on how much you eat, and it depends on what you're going to do. And so, instead of focusing on training, physically or spiritually right after eating, simply focus on intellectual development. And as a habit in itself, it can be very easy to get into. It's because I don't have to rely on time. I'm relying on, okay, I do this, then this will happen, which can easily be developed and can easily be maintained as long as I don't have anything else to do ahead of time. And it doesn't have to be a big, study session. It could be like, let's say 20 minutes or 10 minutes, even 2 minutes. Like, even if it's very small, the repetition of the behavior itself is what is truly needed to get it fully established. It doesn't matter if it's 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour or 2 hours. What really matters is, okay, even if you have to do the bare minimum, do it for a particular time, and that will strategically lead to me having that habit established, which would then allow me to do it much without thought later on down the road, which can be very beneficial. Is because I've noticed that even though I want to study, even though I want to do intellectual activities, my randomness and my lack of structure is really getting to me. It's because I'm not really consistent every single day studying something or doing something schoolwork related, repetitively. And to me, this could be very detrimental to succeeding in my strategic vision of passing all my classes. Now, if I just had the habit of focusing on academics even a little bit every single day without missing a day. And how much meals do we have per day? Well, sometimes I have 2, sometimes I have 3. Okay, so that's 3 separate times. Optimally, within a day, to where I can focus on something academic-wise. And so if I develop this habit, even if it's a very small amount of time or a big amount of time, I still have that structure to where, okay, after the meal, I study. Or after the meal, I do something academic-wise. So I'm not, bouncing back and forth randomness, putting in a lot of mental effort saying, oh, I have to do it at this time, or I have to do it now, or, okay, when can I do this? Do it after a meal. And it's that simple. So that's really my thought on what I've realized, which is a very good realization for me. Now, yeah. Now we're going to get into what went wrong. I didn't dedicate as much time I would want to because I stayed up very late talking to a friend. Now, I've realized whenever it comes to trying to follow something, sometimes I stray from it because I see something else as more important. Sometimes that is the case, but sometimes it's not the case. Now, whenever it comes to sleep in particular, sleep is very, very, very crucial for studying and memorizing and retaining, memory for whatever it is you're trying to study. So, because of this little misstep here, the entire day, the next day, I didn't have a lot of energy to really do much. I still forced myself to study, but it was much harder to retain that information. It was much harder to focus on what I was studying. So, because of this, it really made things much, much more harder on me. Another thing was, I studied in the wrong way due to forgetting what the actual format of the test entitles. Now, I studied the hand anatomy in the correct way. I studied it good. But whenever it comes to the microanatomy test, I approached it good. I studied it good. However, I studied on the wrong type of format of paper, what I thought was going to be the test. But it turns out it was actually something else that I've done, I should have remembered, but I forgot. And because I forgot that crucial piece of information, I got the same exact test score that I did the previous. Even with all that effort of studying, I studied on the wrong format, which didn't correlate well to the actual test, which was on a different format. So, what I mean by format? What I mean is, okay, you have a piece of paper, and what I was doing was simply memorizing facts that fill in, a particular line of text. And so I memorized it well. I memorized the entire section, which could have brought my grade up high enough to where I'd say, okay, well I passed the hand anatomy, and I got the grade of the microanatomy high enough to where I could make it up with successful tests and successful assignments down the road. But because I studied in the wrong type of format, in the wrong type of way, though the studying was good, it didn't strategically correlate to what the actual test was. Even though it was the same information and all that, my approach didn't correlate with what was going to be presented. Which kind of, well, there's the result, you know. The same exact result before I even started studying. Or not before I started studying, but before I started taking a lot more intensely within studying for the next retake. Now, yeah, that wasn't really good. But I definitely did learn from it. So next time, I think I do have a plan for avoiding that mistake for the next time around, which I'll get to in the next page. Now, another thing that went wrong was I could have time blocked better. Now, even though I have the capability to time block, I don't have the specific, habit, or not necessarily habit, but more so experience with looking at a particular time, looking at my day, time blocking, and actually following through with the time block and focusing on what I wanted to focus on at that particular time of day for that particular duration, right? I know how to time block, but I don't have the particular experience of being used to time blocking and actually following through with it. And so I time block, but even though I followed through with some of it, I didn't follow through with all of it. And I didn't time block efficiently like I could have. So that's something I could definitely improve, is time blocking, the act of time blocking. And of course, enacting on the strategy I set out for myself, the plan I set out for myself in order to actually go through with it. And so that was another thing that went wrong, which, if it didn't go wrong, I would have benefited even further and studied better. Now, I'd say another thing that could have went wrong, or I believe did go wrong, was my nutrition. Now, it wasn't bad. My nutrition wasn't bad, but the consumption of sweets and processed foods and candy, which, since it was Christmas break, generally I really wanted to enjoy some, good treats, which it's pretty normal. A lot of people do it. But it could have impacted my energy levels and my cognitive functioning negatively. It's because what you consume, I know, really impacts what goes into the brain and how it either helps the brain function better or decreases the brain's performance. At least whenever it comes to memorization, retaining memory, and so forth. Which, because of, how I approach my nutrition over the past 3 days, it could have affected it in a particular way. Which, do I have evidence of it being actually true? I don't. But I believe in the scientific scheme of things, and how nutrition really impacts mental health, and of course the brain itself, it could be a likely possibility that it did. So I must also count the possibilities too. So that was another thing that went wrong. And another thing would be, because I didn't have a consistent schedule for rest, sleeping, when I woke up early suddenly, my quality of sleep wasn't as good as I really wanted it to be, making me feel sluggish throughout the day, which I talked about previously. This made it harder to feel wakeful and focused, making studying a lot harder and more difficult to retain information, which I kind of went over on the upper part of the page as well. Let me turn this. Alright, now this is very important. What can I do to improve my performance? To improve from the operation itself? How can I improve from these 3 days with the lessons I've learned going forward toward bettering myself? Okay, so what I put down was understanding my learning style. Now, I was thinking about it today, actually, within my class. Whenever it comes to learning styles, I know they exist theoretically. And it reminds me of love languages, the theory of love languages. And love language in itself is particularly interesting. It intrigued me. It's because whenever it comes to language, okay, language has a lot of diverse dialect, right? But there's multiple different types of languages. As you'd say, there's multiple different types of learning styles. And so a learning style in itself is like a language. What is your primary language? And for example, a native in their language could have poor dialect, could have poor grammar, but still have that particular language. Or let's say you're trying to understand a different language, a different approach of learning, that is not your primary type of learning, so it's not going to come easy to you. And so it's like you trying to, like, for example, you don't know what your learning style is, so you're trying to do something that won't really correlate best with your particular learning style, as if you were trying to speak another language you don't even know. And if you know vaguely, you're not really pursuing it properly to fully understand it. And so that's my kind of 2 cents on the correlation between learning styles and language. So because of this realization, I was wondering, okay, so what's my particular learning style? If I can learn what my particular learning style is, not only I can strategically go about fine-tuning that style in order to better my performance in school and academics to study further, but it can also help me with lifelong learning, applying the lessons I've learned from my learning style and applying it to learning other things, like for example things I am interested in, like for example exercise science or some parts of anatomy, like the cardiovascular system and the systems of the body, right? Or let's say, in the future, while I'm in the military, I need to use it for learning to improve my handling with firearms. That could be another good one. So what I can improve from this is definitely learning my learning style. And through attaining that style of mine, or not attaining it, but more so moving more in accordance with it, further my progression through strategically moving more with my nature, if that makes sense. Alright, so another thing I can improve on is planning more specifically in terms of planning steps to better ensure success. Now, I thought of this while I was reflecting earlier. Structure can be very important. So I want you to think of chess for a second, right? You have all your chess pieces and you have your opponent. Your opponent moves a pawn, for example. Then you move a pawn. But do you just move a pawn? Or do you really think of what you're going to move in order to have, a better setup? For example, this is called an opening move. So within your strategy, what will be your opening move to open up different opportunities to later, move all your pieces to strategic advantage position? And that's what I was thinking about planning more specifically. So if you have a plan, you have, let's say, a specific vision. For example, mine was, study for microanatomy. The microanatomy test. Okay, well, how do you go about it? What's your plan? How are you going to execute the plan? What's your tactics that you're going to use? And so, though I did plan okay, I didn't plan specifically enough, and I didn't follow through with a lot of it, what I did plan, which was very vague. It was very subjective. And so I was thinking if I made my plans more specific, kind of like stepping stones toward a particular path, and follow through with the plan, while sitting and resting and thinking, okay, as I have this paper in my hand, how can I envision myself going about it? What obstacles do I think I'm going to face along the way? And so really think of this and putting things down and following through with it, but not just following through with it, also understanding the situation as time goes on and adapting to that situation, and still kind of coming back to the plan. Or if something happens to where you need to plan differently, adapt to the situation, plan a little differently, but still staying on the particular goal in mind within the plan itself, within the steps, and moving forward. So another thing I can improve on is planning more specifically. Another thing I can improve on is cultivating the habit of academic study right after every meal, which I've already talked about. Gathering useful information about upcoming tests to better prepare. Now, this is another thing I really want to do. Gathering information is very, very, very crucial. If you want to plan, if you want to strategize, you need information. Information is key. And it was information I lacked, which if I had that particular information while I was also studying these 3 days, I would have got a higher score based on that information alone, is because I approached it in a way that would correlate to the specific format, template of what that test is going to be like. So, for the future, gathering information is very, very, very crucial. What's the test going to be like? What's the format? And how can I study toward better ensuring my success based on the format I know that's going to be presented? If it's possible. Sometimes they don't allow you to know, but... Now, another thing would be improve my quality of sleep. Now, this is very crucial, which I talked about earlier in the video. Sleep quality is very, very, very important. I know I've been on and off about sleep quality for years now. Sometimes I'd be really, really good, stay consistent with the sleep schedule for a long time, then change it again, then fall off of it, then change it again, then fall off, then go right back to it. It's like an up and down thing. So, improving my quality of sleep would allow me to function better in class. I'd be able to cognitively retain information better, pay attention better and focus, which is very, very crucial if I really want to increase my academic performance and achieve my strategic vision of passing all my classes for graduation, and so forth. So another thing would be improving my quality of sleep. Alright, and this one would be combine mundane study with what I'm actually interested in. Now, this right here was something I remembered while I was reflecting, something that Elon Musk said, and that it's to combine with what you need to do with what you're interested in. For example, if I'm studying, let's say, how the muscle contracts, and there's like a lot of mumbo jumbo nonsense that goes into the very specific deep details on how that goes about, right? So my brain's not going to care about that. I know I am interested in anatomy, but I'm not going to care about what happens on the cellular levels because I'm basically not going to use that information further within my life. Why do I need to learn things on the cellular level, memorize the facts, have a particular time frame for it, when the knowledge itself is going to be useless to me in the far future, you know? So instead of having that mindset, my master taught me find reasons to do something instead of finding reasons not to do something. And so finding reasons to do something correlates really well with combining what you need to do with what you're interested in. So basically, let's say you have this thing here. I'd say it's something to do with muscle contractions. How can this correlate with sprinting? Or how can this correlate with push-ups? So not only you are learning the science behind how muscles contract, but you're also learning how it correlates with something you're interested in and you really want to do and apply yourself to, which would be push-ups. What can you study from this? What can you take away from this that will help you better apply toward a particular activity you're interested in? And from Elon Musk, what he says is, this would allow you to better retain the information you study from something that was once mundane and useless. What was useless suddenly became useful toward progressing your goal and learning what you actually want to learn. Combining what you want to learn with what you need to learn to pass a test academically. And so that is one other thing that I can definitely improve on, that I can definitely use my advantage to, that could reduce my boredom, but also increase my study performance, which in turn I believe, at the very least, could increase my grades, or maintain my grades, all for the sake of graduating high school, passing all my classes. And that's really it for what I can do to improve on. Now, this is the first time I'm ever doing this. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this every single time I conduct an operation toward a particular goal of my desired outcome. Now, all my operations will correlate to my strategic vision, which would be graduating high school and passing all my classes, preparing myself mentally and physically for the Marines, and of course excelling well within my ninjutsu practice. So I'm going to be very awkward in this recording because, well, I'm not used to simply talking while recording, talking to my own self. But basically I'm going to use these videos as a tool. So whenever I need to refer back to looking at my past, looking at the things I've done and the things I've accomplished, I can simply watch it in a simple video of my Afteraction reports. And so I'd have information and my history better organized to where I can refer back to it whenever I wish, in a very easy way of watching it through video. So it could be, at least to me, a really good strategic tool for my success in the future. Learning from your history, learning from your past to better yourself and approach the future. And yeah, that's really what this first report is. And of course, someday, or the more I do this, the more I'll improve in my reports, and the more I'll improve communicating that report to the video in particular. This is the first time, and I think I'm very accomplished. I think I did pretty well. Now, my personal thoughts would be, I did pretty okay for my first approach and my first strategy. Now, one day I'd like to become a master strategist. And to do that is simply exercising strategy constantly, planning constantly, going through those plans, failing, learning, growing, and of course leading to success over time, which would in turn increase your skill and polish your skill as a strategist, polishing your strategy, becoming a better strategist through experience. And this is also one of my main goals. And I believe that through strategy, I can achieve my strategic vision and excel. And that's really what I believe. The power of strategy is extremely, extremely useful. And that's what I see. And so, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply it. Thank you for listening.